Hello and welcome to another edition of the Girlfriends After Show. I'm your host, James Lott Jr. I'm having the worst lighting, you guys. It's like it's dark outside right now, which I'm very happy. It's morning time, it's dark, it's overcast. Here in LA, it's a big deal, so I'm glad. But it's working with my light. I have a ring light over here, this light over here. I don't know, it's kind of, I don't know, it's just low. It feels too bright. So we're just gonna do this. Hopefully you can see me. I'm James Lott Jr., your host, and I wanted to do something a little slightly different. This is the Girlfriends After Show, so we do talk about girlfriends on the show. It's on Netflix right now, also on DVD too. On DVD. It's about episode 12 called The List. It aired 1/15/2001, and the premise was that each girl, we're talking about relationships, and each girl talks about their kind of their dream man and puts a little list under your pillow, and each have different results. So this time I'm not going to talk about the actual episode itself. Many of you have watched it already, know it. But for those of you who are fans of the whole series and have watched like I have, I want to speak about their relationships. This is a great jumping off point of talking about kind of what each woman, who is very different, what they were looking for, or what they thought they were looking for. So let's start with Toni, because that's one that's very in your face and transparent at the beginning. Toni was considered, I guess, the gold digger, even though she didn't. I always got Toni. Toni was bougie. Toni had some, issues, but she came from Fresno. And anybody who's come from less than desirable means, so for some people, they want to not ever go back to that again. It's also about having her going back to Fresno fund. Totally get it. And how she wanted better for herself. She grew up on a farm, lots of brothers and sisters. She wanted better. And she was, think about it, Toni also worked. So Toni wasn't just this I watched this show and I see so many nuances to it now that I just saw it 20 years ago. Toni had her own, she worked for a realty place, and then she had her own realty place she opened later on in later seasons. So she always worked. Toni had a job. She was never about saying, I want to quit my job and whatever, but she just wanted a man who could either equal or better her in the money department. She had no problem with that. She was like, she wanted status and stature. She had no problem also contributing to that, but she wanted that also in a man. But it came across in early episodes, it's kind of like this gold digging, you just want a man for his money. Made jokes about it. And it's funny that some of the men that she was really in love with throughout the series, they didn't have money. I don't know if that's the brilliance of the writing and the direction that they did in the series. Greg was a painter, a starving artist. And she had to choose between him and the doctor. The doctor gave her chlamydia, and so we'll talk about all that later in other episodes and stuff. And so he had the money and the stature, but it wasn't, I don't know, he wasn't a doctor. I forgot what he was a doctor. Clay, that's what it is. But he wasn't all that. So one time she had a guy she fell in love with, loved him. And she messed it up because he didn't have no money. Then she had Clay, who had money, but also had other things going on. Brilliant writing there. But ends up with Dr. Todd Garrett, who seemingly has money, but then has gone into debt. And she doesn't file taxes after they got married. I didn't call it a powder keg moment. They used to call that on Sex and the City, where it's like everything seems great, and then boom, the third shoe drops. And it's like, how do they deal with that? And so that was something that was very interesting for Toni, because then she ended up she did love him. But then they had too many things just go down. But I just think it's a whole thing of the whole, and she ended up not having a man. I mean, she ended up, when she left the show, she had her baby and she left. So that's kind of interesting for her journey. We'll go to Lynn, who was open to everybody. I think Lynn was kind of she wasn't into money. She's a bohemian chick, very smart, all these degrees. She dated Vasco, you know, the Jamaican. And I love the twist on that, where she was always kind of the freeloader, in between jobs, little play jobs. And when Vasco didn't have a job, it bothered her. I thought that is just like, oh my God, again, it was brilliant how they turned it on its ear. And I think even Joan said something about that, like, oh, so now the shoe's on the other foot. Very interesting, right? So that was interesting to have that happen with her. Um, but she also fell in love with the Saul Williams, who played him, the guy who would do poetry and spoken word, but was celibate. And Lynn was the sex person. So it seems like Lynn got in relationships that were almost the opposite of her, and she had to like live in that and deal with that and come out of it. Besides the guy she dated, Lenny, that was a lot like her. They thought they were brother and sister at one time, so that was kind of funny too. At the end of the series, I think I'm like I think Lynn wasn't seeing anybody. I don't think she was seeing anybody. Can't remember. We'll get to the end of the series and we'll find. But I just felt all those guys didn't work out, and life, went on for her. She was fine, but she became a big star, that kind of stuff. Then you have Maya, who was the young mother, young wife, church going, loved her man Darnell. Darnell cheated on her. I always thought if he hadn't done that, what would have happened? I mean, they probably would have stayed together. But I think in a way it was kind of good because they found their way back to each other. So she ended up being with Darnell at the end. But it was interesting because she had to discover herself. It was a very real thing for women that if you get married, have kids young, and half your life you just all you know. What do you do now? So we saw her date around the baseball player, Jalen, all these guys. No, these guys, they're all like various guys. Well, the baseball player was rich. The other one was Jalen. It was very interesting. She dated different kinds of guys. But Darnell was her soulmate. And that was just that. And I loved them together. And when Khalil Kane came on as Darnell, just it solidified it. He's so good opposite Golden Brooks. They just had the best chemistry. And they were funny and they were serious. And he was hardworking and she was hardworking. They always showed her as a hardworking person. So they were a great match. But the other guys she dated, they were fine. But they were just for her to find herself. And I think that was very important. And even when they got him with Lena, we didn't see her that much, but you could tell she was a substitute. She wasn't Maya. And so that young love did persevere. So that was her. Then we got Joan. Joan, from the very beginning, it was always like she wants to get married, have the kid, do the whole fairy tale thing, which a lot of women want. So Joan was a representation of that. And it was funny to watch a Black woman portray that also, because all the white women we see portrayed it all the time. So it's good to see a Black woman portrayed, and she wants the same things as any other woman wants. Whether it's realistic or not, again, it all shows the complexity of relationships. And she dated so many different kinds of guys. You start thinking about it, from Ellis to homeboy who was a sex addict. So she had the actor, the sex addict, the young guy. I mean, she was like, she moved around, but she had the 3-month rule. Her and Davis got together for a little bit, with a kiss or whatever stuff. It was very much, oh my God, they got the hips, Marcus, which we talked about in early episodes. It wasn't until way later where she ended up with homeboy, who, Rasheed Jones, who they always paired Joan with a lot of dark-skinned Black men, which I like, of course, which is great. But I thought it was very interesting. They did a lot of them were, but I think that was a great thing, representation-wise, aesthetic-wise, to see that dark-skinned Black men can be leading men, can be sexual, can be sexy. I mean, there's a thing in the Black community sometimes with the light skin, dark skin thing, and a lot of people go for the light skin. There's nothing wrong with that, of course, at all. I mean, I'm not dark myself, but I like seeing the representation on screen and sometimes a shade makes a difference. Shading and coloring makes a difference. So any dark skinned Black boys watching the show or Black young men watching the show can see that they're as attractive as anybody else. So I liked that. I liked that a lot. And Joan ended up getting her kind of happy ending. I've heard Tracy Ellis Ross talk since then saying she would actually like to have Joan not have nobody now and found happiness in herself. That's interesting. It's an interesting take on it. I don't know how I feel about that completely, but I kind of like that she had a happy ending, even though we didn't see the rest of it and the show ended. But he engaged, she got engaged and everything. But I liked Aaron because Aaron was also different for her and broke down so much because we lived in that little tiny apartment and she was like all these different things. It was good. I mean, I think watching each of the girls' journeys because they were all so different was amazing. And I said, as I'm watching these episodes again in present day brain and looking at it, and as I'm older and as I've been around a lot longer, I'm seeing the writers done such a great job. They did such a great job. Yeah, some of the episodes were silly, which is as comedy. That's what it's there for. And some relationships were played for fun and slapstick. But it was really good. And even with William going from Yvonne to Monica. I mean, that's just like they're two strong women. So William liked strong women, but they were two very different kinds of women. One was, cop, down home girl. The other one was bougie, uptown. But they each were very strong. And it seems like William was attracted to that. And again, both darker skinned women. So I like. And I thought, that's what I like about the show. The show actually showed the different shades, literally, when they casted people. And they had white folks on it too, and Asian and everything. I remember the episode where the Asian girls were just like them and they were fighting about seating. They showed everything. It's very LA. In LA, we have everything. We're very LA. So I got that's why I said I had some stuff going on. So that's kind of why I think about that. So I just want to talk about that because this episode's about them thinking about the perfect men in first season. But I thought, let's talk about like their journey. And of course, we'll go further in as the episodes go along, more in depth, depending on the episode when it comes to the relationships. It's very exciting. Girlfriends is on Netflix. You can go ahead and watch it. It's on there. It's great. Go on there. Watch it. And hold on one second, I'm looking at my phone. And I am on JLJ Media, which is on YouTube. And if you're hearing this, hello, we have an audio version. And the audio version is on, if you're watching this, we have an audio version. If you're listening to this, we have a YouTube version. JLJ Media, all streaming services from Spotify to Google, Apple. You can find us, Girlfriends Aftershow. I'm in talks with some of these stars of the show on this podcast, so stay tuned for that. So subscribe and follow so you can know what's going on. And JLJ Media is on all social media platforms. James Lott Jr. is on all social media platforms, also on TikTok. And we will talk to you next time. Talk about girlfriends. Take care, everybody.